Hi, this is Natu, a guy who's way too old and way too long involved in this game, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and this one is going to be with JKS. Obviously, long time of Renegades, but more recently of Complexity. Like, obviously, since we've never done a long interview before, I want to do the thing where we go back in time, but I don't do the whole thing where I go back to, like, you know, people are, like, playing Mario or whatever, because let's be real, everyone did that. I always thought that's kind of a whack origin story for most people. But my question goes like this. Obviously, coming out of the Oceanic scene, well, I followed in 1.6 tournaments that the Oceanic teams were at. Notice the way I carefully phrased that there, because no one gave a fuck. Like, these teams weren't actually that good, JKS. Like, I know Chad and all the rest of them have the glory days in their minds, but like in reality, they were usually an also ran region, and actually, even it was actually usually weird things like just saying swear words a lot that they were famous for. It wasn't really being good in Counter-Strike. So I noticed in CSGO, this is actually a region I thought would probably never develop, to be fair, because if you think of the ones that developed towards the end of 1.6, it was stuff like China. It wasn't, you know, even some of the smaller areas. So one thing I noticed early on in your career was you were one of the teams that infamously got given a spot at a major. It was the ESL Cologne, but it wasn't Oceanic qualifier specifically. And the reason why I bring that up is because even though it's not like you were just told, here's like a free spot to your team specifically, your region was basically just given a free spot into the major. So I know at the time that makes people like think, this is unfair. Like, you know, this team would lose to, let's say, you know, the other 10 teams in Europe that didn't qualify for the tournament. When you went to this event, was it a big deal to go to the major? Was your team actually any good at the time? Like, could you have matched up with the teams that probably think they should have been there instead?
You mean Cologne 2014, right?
Yeah.
I think at the time, I don't think we were like a contending team. I think maybe if we faced one of the lesser teams at event, we could have done like a close game. Maybe we could have actually beat them. But I mean, like versus any of the really good teams, we were just not really anywhere close to them. And I think that's just obvious, right? Because like I think even before, like earlier in the scene, like in 2014, we had like way less opportunities to practice overseas, and
sure,
like it's not like now, you know, like back then we were just playing against each other kind of thing. So it was a lot harder than what it is nowadays. And I think in that tournament actually we faced Dignitas, and then we faced Titan. And because of how the major worked back then, like the better team, the highest seed or something like that, I think they got the better side, or like they could pick sides. So it's just like when you play Nuke versus Titan or something like that, you're going to end up on T side, and then you have to play versus Kenny S. And yeah, just like little things like that where I feel like it wasn't like there's no way that we could have done anything good if we played versus the best teams. But I think maybe if we played versus the one of the lesser teams, we could have done something, I think.
Right, another thing is that I know some of the regions that had to develop over Counter-Strike, it's famously the Brazilians and the Koreans did this, is they used to just come to Europe, they would go like a couple of weeks extra before there was a couple of tournaments there, and basically they would do like a boot camp, but at like a specifically an internet cafe or something, and then obviously the ideal place was if you did it in Sweden back then, because then you could play all the Nordic teams.
Yep.
Right, at what point did what eventually became the Renegades team? At what point did this team start coming for like extended boot camps or more than just, you know, like a day before the tournament? Because I'm guessing it must have been fairly early on, just because of like how much of an arse on it is to travel to Europe, etc. Anyway, right?
Yeah, so actually our first one, I'm pretty sure, was ESL Cologne 2014. We boot camped in Germany about, I think, for a week and a half before that. And I mean, it got us a lot of experience, but like obviously it didn't work out too well in the tournament. But I think after that, I can't remember exactly, but I think it might have been after the 2015 Cologne. I think that was when we started doing it a lot more, because it was kind of just like, oh, sorry, not Cologne 2015. It was Katowice 2015 when we won in Poland. After that, I think we started putting more time into it because we had that opportunity to go to the major, and then we're like, oh, we can actually beat teams, you know. So we started putting more time into it, and I think the organization at the time, which was Vox Eminal, I think they also helped us. And for us as players, it was really hard for us to do that because we were working at the time. Like me and Aaron were studying, and then Chad and Havoc and Top Gun, they were all working. So it's just like we all had jobs or study time and stuff like that. So it was really difficult for us to boot camp before that. But when we started realizing that we could actually do stuff, and then we had opportunities, and we started winning games, it was obviously a lot more enticing to do that. And I remember like when we went to Katowice 2015, the qualifier for that, I had to do like university work on the plane, like going there, and then I had to do it also on the way back. So it was like I wasn't really getting a lot of sleep during that time, and I was like, we just had so many other priorities in our life that also needed to be attended to. So, even though it sounds like pretty stressful, it was actually quite a fun period, and there's actually fond memories of back then where like I feel like we were the underdogs, so like a heavy margin, but we still did some damage. But after that, we started taking it more seriously, and then of course we got Renegades offer, and then we could do that a lot more.
Right, actually, what you're talking about there, the qualifier for Katowice when it was a major back then, was also an example I've often given as to why you could definitely rework the way like the RMR system works, for example. Because I know a lot of people are concerned, for example, NA was an obvious one this region. People didn't think that some of the teams that came from there were good enough to be in where they were at the major, etc. But I always said the system they had here was perfect because there was two teams. It was yours and it was the Brazilian Luminosity who came into this qualifier. And again, if you'd have just had a direct qualifier spot to the major, some hater would have been like, well, my team would have beaten this squad or whatever. But because you guys came in and actually had to beat the Europeans, like your team beat the one with like MSL and Fetish and a bunch of those players, like known Danish players, you were able to like prove that you were good enough to get into the tournament. So my question goes like this. One of the things I've heard if you're in smaller regions is it's hard to actually figure out how to play against the meta of like Europe, for example, if Europe's the dominant region, which is one of the reasons why you want like exposure and to go there for a while, right? If you went here for a few weeks, a tournament or two, and you go back, do you actually even try and do anything special? Like, do you watch demos and see if you can make that work? Like, obviously the teams you play against locally back home, I doubt they play exactly the same style. So how do you work that angle out?
I can't remember exactly how we did it back in the day. I think we just did any strat in the in one of the hotel rooms like an hour before the game or something like that. I don't think it was anything like too crazy. I think just because like we literally flew from Australia to that event, I think we're just like super confident in our own game and we just had to play the way that we normally play, and then we just had to do like a little bit of any strat just to figure out like who plays where on the map and just like little things like that, which teams do nowadays, but I think they do it a little bit more extensive nowadays. But back then it was just more like we obviously didn't have much time to prepare for the event, and obviously we didn't have the same practice, and it's more just about like playing to your strengths. And I think like if you went back nowadays, you kind of did, if you had like the knowledge that you do now, it'd probably be kind of similar, but obviously we'd have a lot more anti-strat just because of the way the game is played nowadays and stuff. So I don't know if it's like completely comparable, but back then at least all we really did was just like look at the spots and stuff, and then maybe like if they had like a couple executes and things like that, because back then obviously the game was like really telegraphed the way that people did things. It was a lot more obvious. But yeah, I think if we could have, I think we would have wanted to boot camp before the event. I think for sure. I think that was just like the way that teams functioned back then, especially from Australia, just because like you said, we never really got like any time to play versus the good teams. So yeah.
Right, the tournament that really got everyone's attention, of course, was this Gfinity Spring Masters 2. And I'll start it off by like downplaying it initially by saying like they didn't actually get out the groups. It's not like they went and won the fucking tournament or something. But you have to understand, again, roll back to what I was talking about before about the not so glorious history of like Oceanic Counter-Strike, for example. And then when I explained that because you won a map off Fnatic, probably the best team in the world, you beat Team Liquid, who was like a good NA team, probably second or third still at this point, and then you won a map off NIP, who was still one of the better teams in Europe, and obviously a team that themselves will go to finals and semi-finals, you know, one of the best in the world. So even though you didn't get out from, because I will say, by the way, you were in like the hardest group by far. You had like Navi still to play and stuff. So it was a killer group. People obviously noticed, like you look at the order I went there, like, holy fuck, this team's actually mixing it up with the best squads. And it was also, by the way, a weird like best of two format. It wasn't like a best of three series. So you did get a map against each of these teams. When you do this, right, it was also you individually were having like a real career spike at this point in time, and you were having all these amazing games against the likes of Fnatic. So can you give me some thoughts on what was going on this time? This seems like one of those like surreal movie type moments.
Yeah. So actually before that event we did boot camp. We boot camped at Gfinity. So we had like a little side room, not on the stage like where they played the games, but just like a little side room. And I think we played with Immunity there. I think Immunity actually came over as well. The other Australian team at the time. They came a little bit later than us, and I think our practice was going like super well. Like we were playing teams like Envy, and we were like doing really well in practice. So we had like a lot of confidence going into that event. And I don't know, something just like it's weird to describe it as a player, but like sometimes events just feel like you just feels really nice, you know, like, and you're having like a good performance, and like if you have like a good performance on the first map, then like for the rest of the event you just feel like solid the entire way through. And I think that was like one of those events, and obviously it was like one of my breakout events, and I think I felt just like really comfortable being there because we were there for like a week and a half before. I knew like all the surroundings, and I knew the building, I knew the people, and like, yeah, it was just like, it wasn't like just like something completely different. And I mean, obviously at the time, I think I was playing pretty good as well individually, and we were having like a really good time as a team. I think that was just as we got Yem in the team, I believe,
Right.
for Top Gun. And obviously Yem was a friend of mine before, so I felt like everyone, of course, on Vox we're all friends and stuff, but I felt like I got like a buddy of mine from another team to come join our team. So I felt like even better. And yeah, I think just the way that like we played was kind of like a honeymoon period, I guess you could say, but not necessarily, because I think it happened a little bit after Yem joined the team. But yeah, I don't really know, to be honest. I think like we were just one of those teams where like if we have a good first map, we just carried on through the rest of the event. And I think we could have actually beat Fnatic 2-0. I think the second map was like 16-13 or something like that, and we were super close. So I think maybe if we won that map or something, we would have made out of groups, but it wasn't meant to be. But yeah, it was just a really good event to play, and obviously it really benefited me quite a lot because everyone started looking at my name, and yeah.
What did you actually think about that, though? Because I noticed one thing that people forget about if you're a fan with players is it's not like all the players sit down and then say, like, wrestling style, like, right, you're going to be like the star player, and then they're going to think I'm like a really good veteran. Like, basically, you don't control what fans think of you, or even maybe if you are supposed to be a star player. Like, I've told the story in the past that a long, long time ago when he actually had problems choking and stuff, Device was once told me, like, stop calling me a star player. Like, I never chose to be that. I'm just a player in the team. Yeah. And if I have a good game, I have a good game. If I have a bad game, I have a bad game. I ain't said fair enough. Okay, I guess we did choose that. So did you embrace the idea that you were supposed to be the star player of Renegades? And by the way, obviously people expected, I'm sure, like pretty ridiculous overperformance every single tournament for a while from this on, right?
Yeah. I think when I joined Vox, I think I was really confident in like my play as an individual. Like I felt like I was like dominating like the Australian scene. Like, not to brag or anything like that, but that's just the way I felt. I was like super confident, and I've played the game for so long that like even back in like 1.6, like I played for ages, and then once I joined that team, I felt like, okay, this is my time. Like finally I'm in the best team in Australia. This is like all I've wanted, like for so long, and then I think that just gave me like so much confidence that I just really believed in myself back then. And when I joined the team, I wasn't necessarily like the star player, but they definitely hyped me up all the time as like I was like really good, and I was the youngest person in the team. So, and when you're the youngest person in the team, it kind of feels like everyone's older than you, and they're all kind of like looking out for you, kind of thing. That's at least what it felt like in that team, and that's something that I was really used to from earlier on in my career, because when I used to play as like a kid, I used to play on my brother's teams and stuff like that, and I was always the young player. So it definitely felt like very similar to that, and like I was always really good back then. So it just felt like very natural for me being in that team. And after that event, everyone calling me like a star player and stuff like that, it's not something that like I thought I was, but I always knew like I was pretty good. So I never really considered myself as a star player before that, but I definitely knew I could be good. And then after that, when people started saying that, it was definitely like a lot of pressure. I remember after the event, I think I had a really like average event. Like I had like a DreamHack London or something like that where I played awful. And I think that was like directly after Gfinity. So it was like kind of like a little bit of a shock to me, because I come from like a really good event, like my breakout event, and then I play like that shit event. And then it's definitely like early on in my career, I had that reality check where like, okay, I'm not actually as good as I think I need to put like a lot more work in. And even though people are calling me a star player and stuff, I need to have like, maybe back then I was a little bit more immature, so like I just kept working harder and harder. Like whereas nowadays I think I have more of a realistic approach to things. But yeah, it was definitely a bit of a shock to me whenever I started calling me a star player. It was definitely a lot of pressure, especially when you're young like that.
Right, obviously everyone knows to some degree the story of a tournament called the ESL One Cologne 2015, because it's basically like Chad's running meme that he makes on all the broadcasts. That, like, do you remember the game against Titan that we had, whatever? Because it's like Chad's the one big, it's his one big moment, isn't it? So he has to like live in that glory moment, obviously. But obviously the context of the joke is that was a big deal. Like now you're actually at a major. By the way, Titan was one of the better teams. Like people have to remember, this was obviously the team that had all those fantastic players in the past. I think this is now obviously when they just made the change, they got Shocks and Smiths came back on. By the way, Shock's still fucking good player. It's not like they had nobody. So this was a big upset, right? To do it at a major, is it different?
So say that again.
Is it different to get an upset at the major? Does it actually have like a special meaning beyond just a game?
Yeah, I think it definitely does feel a lot different. I think back then it was a lot more pressure for us. Honestly, I don't really remember that game too much. I'm not gonna lie. I don't really remember that Titan game. I know Chad does, and I know Chad always talks about it. And we actually played CS the other day, like maybe 2 days ago, and he was talking about it as well. But he had a really good event that tournament. And personally, I don't remember that game, but I remember the last game when we played NIP. And after we beat Titan, we were so hyped, and we were so like, fuck yeah, we can do this, you know, like. We just need one game. We can get out of groups. We can go playoffs at the major, and like obviously that was a massive thing for us at the time because we never made playoffs. And being an Australian team and all that, like you know, you have like the whole country behind you and all that stuff. So we definitely after that win, it definitely felt like we had a lot of pressure on our shoulders, but we were super hyped. And then we went and played NIP in that Inferno game, and I think we kind of got blown out. I think it was like close for the first 3 rounds, and then they just ran over us. And it's one of those learning experiences where it's like super deflating. Like once you come off a high like that, and then you play a game with that much like importance, and you lose, it is really quite like a 100-0 kind of scenario. So yeah, I think it definitely was like there was a lot of hype around that game, and we definitely were like super proud of ourselves. But there was also the negative side of that, where like we kind of just needed to forget about that game, focus on the next game. You know, we're still like the underdogs, blah blah blah. So yeah, I think there was like definitely positives and negatives to winning that.
Right, obviously, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but people know that you guys have been in very difficult circumstances competing on the Tier 1 circuit, which is mostly, primarily, obviously located in Europe with some events in North America over the time you were there. Right, when you're on this circuit, people might know the enormous travel length you have to even arrive in the region. Oftentimes you just stay in the region for months and months and months, depending on what the visa situation is, play all the tournaments, and I've heard that it's just rare that you go back or you go back to update the passport, etc. During this time period where you're actually coming to Europe and you were initially on the Tier 1 circuit, how do you actually handle it if you were going to tournaments and you come like 9th place, or you don't get a big deep run and you don't get like satisfaction of having the storylines? You know, how do you actually handle if you go from tournament to tournament and it's not the results you want?
Are you talking about like during the Renegades period of SPUNJ?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult because, you know, that was the first time any of us have ever had an opportunity like that and to ever do anything like that. And of course, those guys that were on my team, some of them are a lot older than me. They'd been in the scene a lot more. So for them, it was more, there was more pressure for them, I feel like, because I was young, obviously. Like I had a lot of time left to develop and do more things in my career. Whereas for those guys, you know, this was like their time, you know, like their opportunity to do things. And when you're traveling away from home and you're going to like multiple tournaments back to back, and it's hard to find places to practice at. Like you don't have anywhere to live. You have to stay in hotels, and it's like you don't know what's next. And then it's like it's super ambiguous, pretty much. That's the way that I could describe it. And when you have like a bad event like that, you're like, well, where did it all go wrong? Like what did we do? What do we need to fix and shit? So yeah, it was definitely hard back then, and especially like when we have multiple bad events in a row and we need to cut people or something like that. Like that's their livelihood, you know, like you're taking it away from them. And obviously because they're from Australia, it's like they're so far away, they're not going to get the opportunity to do that again, especially back then. Like there's no other teams that were like us. Like you cut like one person off the team, then that's it, they're done pretty much. Like it'd be super hard for them to climb back up and make their way onto an international team. So it's like there is a lot of pressure, and there's also like that's like obviously the negative side of it, but there's also like the good positive side of it, all the joy and stuff, where like you're traveling with your mates, you know, you've never done this before. Everyone on the team's obviously friends. You're all from the same country. You get to travel to tournament, and it's like a dream that everyone was living. And obviously everyone on that team had played CS for a long time, and we'd see the teams before us when they went overseas, and everyone obviously wanted to be like them and represent the country and stuff. So I'd say there's like a lot of positives and there's a lot of negatives to that, but it was definitely very stressful as well. Like you said, like traveling and not knowing like which tournament is next, and like if you place bad, then what's going to happen? Are we all going to get cut? Is someone going to get cut and stuff like that? So, yeah.
Yeah, if people don't know, that's obviously a component that isn't factored in. It's like when you're on a journey like this, you've got to sort of think of it as like, you know, we're all mates and we're all on like this journey together. So it does make it a bit brutal when you're like, right, bad tournament for you, you're cut. Because I noticed in your team, you did all the cuts, but you just did them really slowly and almost one by one. It's like each person got a few months extra. Like, let's see if this guy works out. And listen, that's what I want to ask you is, I know back in the day, this is actually the reason why I know fans won't know this from our relationship now, but actually people like SPUNJ most definitely did not fuck with me. I know advocates me. It's because back in the day, right, when you're an analyst, you have to be a bit harsh sometimes. You have to sort of be like, look, it doesn't matter whether this is a good guy. Like, if the team needs to progress, maybe this guy has to be replaced by someone else. And in your team, if we're being honest, like a lot of these people did eventually have to go. Like you're saying, some of them are older in their career, or maybe they're just not good enough for modern Counter-Strike. So it took a long time though, right? This process of like gradually moving people in and out. And obviously the team totally changed identities before it gets to the period where we can talk about all the success, etc. Did you ever wonder, like, is this all it's ever going to be? Am I just going to be stuck coming like 9th place, like a good tournament's like 5th to 8th or something? Is this just it? Is this what Counter-Strike is? Do you ever wonder?
Yeah, no, for sure. A lot of times over the years, I would definitely wondered that being on the same team. And like, I don't know, it's kind of bad to say that because like I definitely did enjoy like a lot of my time, especially with like a lot of those guys who are now or who were cut off the team. And you know, there's one side of it like where like I really want to do well, and you know, I played this game for so long when I was a kid, and I was watching videos and like frag movies and stuff like that. This is like where I wanted to be. Like I wanted to be number one and stuff like that, and play all these events. And then on the other side of it, I did really have a lot of good times, you know, with those guys, and they obviously gave me the opportunity to play internationally. They got me in the team. Like, so who am I to say that like, you know, this guy needs to go, this guy needs to go, stuff like that. So like, it definitely was really hard sometimes to do that. And I mean, eventually, sometimes we made the decision, and sometimes the organization made the decision. That's just like how it went. And when the organization made the decision, it was a lot easier. Obviously, we didn't really have any part of it. The organization said we had to do this, we had to find a player, and that's it. But when we had to make the decision, it was because like we weren't happy with the results and stuff like that, and something needed to, you know, something needed to give. We needed to change a player. And I know SPUNJ actually had a lot of trouble doing this because he's like a very caring guy, and he understood more than anyone that like when you get cut off the team, that's it. You're done. And like I think he knew that himself, and like he had a lot of trouble doing that to other players on the team. And I mean, like, I can't blame him at all, and I don't think anyone can really blame him. It's not like none of us tried. Like everyone on the team definitely tried all the time. Everyone had the same goals and stuff. It's just sometimes it doesn't work out, and yeah, it's definitely like very shitty. But at the same time, there was like a lot of good memories, and yeah.
I mean, the other side to this, the obvious one, might not have been to you guys inside the team, was I remember years and years ago thinking to myself, this is before we had like big phase teams with all people speaking in English. I remember thinking the obvious place for some of these players, like maybe JKS, to go instead of changing everyone out of his team. So why don't you just go to an NA team? You already live in NA. You play these teams. So, like, look, I know you're not like a massive shit talk, because I assume these players respect you. That's normally what turns Americans off, is if you just trash them in a scrim or something, you need to say some shit to them. But as long as, you know, they think your skills are good, as people have seen now, they'll take in players from outside. I mean, they just want to win at the end of the day. Was this ever a real thing? Because I heard basically the two names that everyone suggested, it might have even almost happened, was JKS and Azza go to different NA teams. Like maybe it would be, I don't know, would it be in Cloud9 JKS? Was it Team Liquid Azza? What was, I heard this was close to happen at one point in time.
Yeah, teams definitely did approach me. And I'm not sure about Aaron. I think some teams approached him as well. I don't know which teams. But I don't know if teams really approached anyone else on our team, and I think that kind of sucks because back then, like I said, you know, once you get cut off the team, you're kind of done. And I think I was like you said on the team, I was the star player. Like I was the one who had most of the good games, and I think that's primarily, well, not primarily, but I think that's kind of because I was set up in a lot of the way that the team ran, and the playstyle of the team is I was set up to end the round and stuff. So like I made the clutches, and I had the good role of going in like third or fourth, the way that the game was played back then.
Yep.
Which isn't not necessarily the way the game is played today. I think everyone can do every role, whereas back then, I kind of had that role of, you know, just the closer, and I think that's why I was obviously highlighted a lot to most teams. So I mean, it kind of sucks for the rest of the guys on the team. That's just the way that the team was run, right? So I think I had some offers from like Echo Fox and stuff back in the day, like when we were living in NA. They weren't like great offers or anything like that, but it was definitely like at the time there were like similar offers to my team. And like if I wanted to go elsewhere, I could have gone occasionally, depending on like my organization and stuff, and if they wanted to trade me. Later on down the line, I got some offers from like Optic and C9 as well, actually, both those teams, and I did want to go to those teams. It's just they couldn't afford my buyout or something like that, and the organizations couldn't reach an agreement. But yeah.
When you say that, like later on in the other offers, like good offers like Cloud9's obviously great org, you can join. When you say that for those ones you did want to join, does that mean the earlier ones you didn't? Because it almost sounded like when you said similar teams, is the vibe that like what's the point in joining a team like equally as good, but then I'm not in this like scenario with all the Australians? Would that have been a concern back then?
Yeah, exactly. Like when I got the offer to join Echo Fox and stuff like that, I think it was Sean Gares who reached out to me.
Okay.
And obviously I respect him a lot as an IGL, especially back then. And it all kind of depended on like our results and how we were doing at the time. I feel like because when we weren't doing too good, you know, it was like maybe 2 or 3 years into playing in that team, and I was like, you know, like you said before, like we didn't have the best placings all the time, and like after a while that can get pretty draining, and you're like, I want to go somewhere else and see if I can do better. And from teams like that, it's more just like, well, they have similar placings to us, and maybe the organization is bigger, maybe they have better sponsors and stuff. But like the team, I didn't really believe in the teams back then. Like I felt like with our teams, even though we didn't have the best results and stuff, we still had like that chemistry together. We played for a long time together, most of us on the team, and it's even to this day, I think that's something that's really hard to replace. And I think that's really important in a team where like everyone gets along, everyone has like similar ideas of how the game should be played, and I think that's like a big component to making a team work. And back then, at least, teams like that I didn't really want to join. But if it was like a team like C9 or something like that, and obviously they have bigger and better players, or like Optic or something, then of course I'd consider it. And I did multiple times for those teams. It's just like it never really worked out. And I mean, I don't like regret it not working out, because eventually our team did work out. We did have like quite a lot of success in the Renegades team, and I guess it's yeah, it's just like an interesting journey, I guess you could say. Like, who knows how it would have worked out if I joined C9 or Optic? Maybe it could have ended up like how it was on Cole right now. You know what I mean?
True.
So, yeah, it's kind of just like one of those things where, like, back then I did think it was a good idea, but maybe it wasn't.
Like you talked then, you were obviously very careful to like be fair in terms of like, you know, not just say because my numbers are better, I'm better, like, you know, like the role that you used in the team, people set you up willingly, etc. These are all key components of how a team operates, and obviously goes without saying you try and put your best players in the best position to succeed, right?
Yep.
The question I have is this: since you were in that one core, at least it wasn't the same team, obviously lots of players came in and out for so many years, and you pretty much did look like you were the best player in the team most of that period of time. Does that mean that did everyone else just understand, as we say in England, how their bread was buttered? Did they know that JKS is supposed to be the star player and give you all these things? Were you ever demanding? Because listen, sometimes teams can want to be too democratic, and sometimes I've even told people like Simple this, like sometimes you actually have to be like, I need this to succeed, or if I have this particular position, for example, I'll just carry the game. Was there ever any of that? Did JKS get everything the way he wanted?
I think when I joined the team, I got most of the spots that I was good at, and I think I carried that throughout my entire time in that team. I don't think I ever really, you know, said, fuck this spot, I hate this spot, you're playing here. Just like kind of thing like that. Like, or like, just like anything like that. I don't think I ever really did that. And I think it's just my personality, to be honest. I want to fit in, and I want everyone to be happy. I don't want people to have like conflicts between each other. I don't want there to be tension between people. Like, it's not fun when you live in a team house, for example, or you always see these people all the time, and then there's like these little things like between each other where like you can't get over and stuff like that. Like, I'm very, I feel like at least I'm very willing to work with people and figure stuff out. And like, I think if I had a spot that was bad, I would kind of take it and see how it goes. And if I don't do good on it or something like that, then maybe like I'll eventually mention it, and then maybe we can make a swap or something like that. But I never took spots off other people because I thought they were bad at it or something like that. Normally it was like, if that ever happened, it was like the coach making the change, or like majority of the team making the change, for example. But I don't think like I ever really did that. I don't think I had that type of personality to do that in a team. And yeah, but I definitely, when I spoke, because back then I felt like I didn't speak a lot. When I spoke, my word was definitely heard. If that's what you're trying to ask, in a sense. If I thought we were doing something bad, like a strat that was bad, or the way that we're playing was bad, if I said something, then most of the people would listen to me, because I never really spoke too much about that. I kind of just let like the IGL run the team. I kind of just played my spot, my role in the team. This is what I do. This is what they expect. You know, so that was the kind of the way I played, at least back in the day. And yeah.
Are you someone in the game who actually comms much? Are you, like, I think that's something else people have said, like you seem like a bit of a quiet player, or I mean, some of the spots you even play, sometimes you can just not talk that much from those.
Yeah, no, in the game, I think I do have good comms. Maybe I don't suggest enough things that I I should suggest. It's something that I've always worked on, especially on T side, because I feel like my spots on the map. Usually, I'm the person playing the outer spots, so I need to give info to the IGL, like what's happening on the side of the map, so they can make a decision if they're in the middle or on the other side of the map. I think like that's something I've always worked on, but um, I think I definitely do have comms, especially on the like CT side and stuff like that. I think I'm pretty good, like just communicating what needs to be communicated and stuff like that. Like I know from the outside it looks like that I'm kind of quiet and all that, but I think it's just because like I'm not one to really get super hyped. And I think that's when the camera is mostly on people, you know, when
Right.
when they're really hyped and they're shouting and yelling and stuff like that. But yeah, I found that like if I do that too much, then like my emotions kind of swing to one side. And so like if we're having a bad game, then maybe I get too tilted or something like that. And if we're obviously if we're having a good game, I'm really hyped and it's great. I tried doing that once in my career and it didn't really work out too well, and I wasn't really comfortable. So I kind of just tend to be like super calm and like mellow, and I just try to give the info that I need to give. And yeah, because I think at least in my playstyle and stuff like that, I think it kind of resembles the way that I do carry myself and communicate. Like I am a pretty calm person, and yeah, and that's just the way I played as well was pretty calm back in the day. Like, you know, I was always clutching and stuff like that. So
Since you played with SPUNJ for a few years, I want to ask this question, which goes like this, right? Normally, I've noticed people that have like either the reputation of like they're like a mastermind and game leader or whatever, or if you don't have that, the only way you can get respect as in game leader, you've got to win. So I noticed when he was in his playing career, actually, at least outside of Australia, we never used to hear that about Chad. Like no one was bigging him up, like wow, his tactics are amazing, or what's he do? Or did he invent this amazing smoke here? Maybe he did do it, I don't know, but it just wasn't the hype at the time, right? But from working with him and seeing him on broadcast for all these years now, you can't fake it. Like you either have it or you don't. And he obviously does have like a good mind for the game. The way he breaks it down is very logical. Seems that he's got a very sort of like reasonable way of assessing how good people are without hyping them up too much, without being too much of a hater. Seems like he's actually got it pretty nailed. So what I want to ask was this. Was he someone who had problems, like, I don't know, expressing his style in the game or in leadership elements? Because clearly he's got some strengths. So what do you think the issues were when you played with him?
I think Chad was back then, at least when we played, and the way that the game was played, he was very tactical. You know, when you think of like existence and stuff like that, you know, like they always come with like really good strategies and like crazy smokes and crazy executes and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of the IGL that Chad was. I don't think he was he never caused conflict in the team or anything like that, but I think he definitely did. One of his weaknesses was he definitely did get like a lot of pressure, and I mean, it's completely understandable when you're the IGL in the team, and like I felt like he kind of put too much pressure on his shoulders. You know, like he's carrying like the whole box / Renegades vibe on his shoulders. He's the IGL, he's the captain, he's the face of the team. He's like the crazy guy who always shouts and stuff, hypes up the team. So like I think he definitely got a lot of eyes, and I think he definitely some of that definitely carried over to the way he played in game. And I think sometimes he definitely felt pressured in the way that he was calling and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm not going to blame him or anything like that. Even now, if I had to IGL and stuff like that, I'd feel like an extreme amount of pressure. But yeah, I think like his strength, at least, they were like creating like all these new strategies and stuff. Like he'd come to practice the next day and he'd have like all these smoke walls and stuff on like Inferno and like all this crazy shit. I think he definitely had like a good mind for the game, and he definitely hypes the team up like a lot. And I think that's something that was really good for us, at least, and the players that we had on our team. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty much how he was as an IGL. And yeah, I think he definitely has a good mind for the game, and you can obviously see it when he's casting games and stuff like that. He definitely knows the basics and the fundamentals of the game really well, and yeah.
Right, from the outside, another thing that helped develop the Renegades and evolve the team into actually being internationally relevant was bringing Kassad as the coach. Can you tell me, because obviously you worked with him for a long time, I know some of your former teammates even worked with him more recently and remade the squad sort of. What's this guy like? What was the impact he had on Renegades?
Yeah, so when Alex joined the team, actually it was kind of a surprise to us. We had PK as coach. He was just like an Australian guy who played 1.6 for a long time, and we felt like we were doing good as a team, and then suddenly Renegades just cut him, and well, not good, but like we felt comfortable with him, and then suddenly Renegades just cut him, and they decided to get an international coach, and we found out it was kassad and stuff. So obviously none of us had ever played with him before, and it was definitely like a very different experience to what we had previously, because obviously we'd only played with Australians and stuff like that, and we only had, I think at that time we only had one coach. It was PK. That was the first coach that we ever had, and he was Australian, obviously. So we didn't really know what to expect. And then when you get someone in from overseas, it's definitely like a learning curve for all the players, and it's definitely a culture difference, especially between Serbia and Australia. I think there's a bit of a culture gap. So it was definitely an interesting time, I guess you could say. But in the beginning, it was pretty good. I think we actually had some good results online with our team. I don't think he agreed with every player on the team. Like, I can't remember exactly what our lineup was back then. I think we had like Ricky and stuff like that. So I think there was like some conflicts in the team with him and the other players. But I mean, overall, I knew it was like a positive change to the team, just because, well, in terms of like furthering us as a team, you know, like with putting more knowledge into the team, because obviously when you're an Australian team, you only have the knowledge from the Australian scene and the Australian players. So I think getting like someone internationally in who had a bunch of different ideas, a bunch of different play styles and stuff like that would really help progress the team and everyone on it. So yeah, I think it was a good move.
When you say there was a culture gap, it reminds me of when Zeus, with a W, not a U, joined Team Liquid, right, as their coach. So the Brazilian guy took over a team, which if people don't know was probably like the shyest, nerdiest like CS team of all time, and they didn't talk, etc. So you had this guy behind them who was used to like pumping people up and like, you know, something similar I'm imagining was going on here, because if people don't know, like Serbians, as far as I could tell from knowing kassad and the others, like they're raw as fuck, mate. Like if you make a mistake in the game, they're definitely not just sort of like quietly patting you on the shoulder. Right? What was the vibe like? Did it? Because the perception of your team again was that you were all a bit quiet, right?
Yeah, no, I think he definitely had the biggest personality in the room, that's for sure. And I think that's just him as a person. There's nothing wrong with that. And it did take some time to get used to, because, like you said, maybe he did things differently in his teams, or his culture was different to ours, and the way that he reacts to certain things might be different to the way that we reacted to certain things. So I think, like you said, everyone else on the team was they weren't like, not everyone was calm, but like most of the team vibe was calm. You know, we kind of let some mistakes slip here and there, and maybe if they got too big, then we talk about it and stuff like that. And I think we were a lot more forgiving on the team, whereas he was kind of the opposite. He wanted to fix the thing straight away. If something that he didn't think was right, he's the coach, you know, we fixed it, kind of thing. And so it was definitely like a learning curve for all of us on the team. And I think that was kind of how the team from that point forward kind of progressed. And I think that was like pretty much the theme for most of Renegades when we had him as a coach.
So obviously a big change in the team was when Nifty joined. So you're getting actually the other way around. A North American player comes and joins the team, but you're in the region, etc. Right? In your particular scenario, if people are only modern day fans, I would contrast it with when Cadian was in this heroic team, where he joined, and he's like a player that's been around, but he joined as like the in-game leader and the AWPer, which is actually probably the hardest thing to pull off in Counter-Strike, as far as I can tell. During this time was part of the era when Renegades started to get better and start to have some international relevance. What was it like to play with Nifty? Because I feel like he's someone where, even though actually, because he was like a likable guy on camera, he was quite well liked during Renegades period. But I know obviously, unfortunately, this whole Envy period at the last end of his career, sort of it looked like soured people on him a lot, and they basically wanted him cut for years and years. So what was it like during the time he was in Renegades?
Yeah, it was, I can't remember exactly when we got Noah onto the team. I think it was at the same time where we got Nexa onto the team, actually, and we just needed to change. From memory, we just had like a bunch of bad results. We needed to change. We needed people to get, and I don't remember who we cut for them. But I know Kassad got Nexa into the team because he was obviously watching him when he was like coming up as a CS player. Obviously he now plays with G2, and back then he was like really unknown at the time, and I think Nifty was on Selfless, I think, or something like that,
yes.
And we picked him up. And I don't remember, to be quite frank, I don't remember the exact reason why we picked both those players up. I know, like I said, Nexa was influenced by kassad, but I don't remember why we picked Noah, but it turned out to be pretty good. We needed an AWPer for the team, and when we picked him up, it wasn't like he was going to be the IGL. We picked Nexa up to be the IGL, and kassad was going to help him IGL because obviously they're Serbian, they speak together and stuff like that. So I think that was actually a decent idea at the time. You know, kassad can bring up this guy and teach him how to call properly, and you know, it might actually work. He knows everyone in the team and stuff like that, so he knows the dynamic of the team, and yeah. And then I think after a while, Nifty became the IGL because I think we had like some troubles with Nexa being the IGL, or maybe I wasn't super comfortable doing it or something like that. But I think Noah suggested it, and yeah, I mean, obviously it worked out for a period. I don't think it was like the greatest choice, but it worked out for the period. I think he was just super confident in what he believed in and like what he thought was the way to play CS and like how to run a team and stuff like that. I think that's kind of the reason why we had a bit of success with him. And yeah, I mean, everyone on the team obviously got along as well, and it was definitely an interesting time for sure. And I think it was a bit, it was one of those periods where like once we got the Serbian coach in with Kassad, we started getting more international players in and trying to branch out a little bit more and see, what else we can do to the team and some other changes that we can make to maybe progress us further. And yeah, I think it was one of those times though as well when we didn't really have a lot of players to look at or choose from. And obviously we weren't the best team at the time either, like we were pretty average. So getting players who were better than that was pretty hard. And yeah.
Well, one of the big player changes you made in the same year, which kind of helped turn the fortune Renegades around, was obviously getting Naf.
Yep.
Now, I've heard some weird story. Like when he joined, there was some concept like he was going to join, because in Optic they used to say he was like the support player, whatever the fuck that term means in an NA team. But as far as I can tell, they all just try and frag out anyway in NA. But when he joined your team, right, he definitely wasn't playing like he was the support player. It looked like he got whatever fucking roles he wanted, mate. And he was actually, I'll give him props, he was hard carrying the stats like almost every game, it felt like. Right, what was it like to have this guy in your team? And obviously this is kind of like I'm alluding to when he kind of developed his name as a star player.
Yeah, I think that was, I can't remember. I think we were at DreamHack Malmo. I think it was when we needed a player change. I think at the time we were playing with Atta, the Swedish guy, as a stand-in.
Okay.
And I think we needed a permanent fifth, and we're like, we didn't really have many options or people to choose from. And then suddenly NAF became available, and we're like, this is a pretty good option, like it's NAF, like he's got a lot of experience and he's a really good player. And I think when he joined the team, I think he might have said something like, he can play any role and stuff like that. But yeah, eventually, he definitely got in the team at least. He definitely got everything he like wanted to do. Like no one ever really said no to him. And he definitely got like pretty much anything he wanted in the team. And like that's not like a bad thing or anything like that. Obviously, he played super good. He carried us to like a lot of games. He was super comfortable in our team. And I think we made him feel as comfortable as possible because obviously we were having a bit of success with him. So I think it just worked out because most of the players on the team were very willing to, do that for him and try something different. And for me, it was a bit of a change, obviously, because like you said, I was always like the player on the team who was considered like the star player, I guess you could say, from the beginning. So for me, it was kind of weird because I had to kind of step aside, and like I said before, I'm not the player in the team who likes to create conflict between people, tension and stuff. And I think if I did that, it might have been a bit bad between me and Keith. And yeah, so he definitely got like a lot of the roles that I kind of had before. And I mean, he obviously played super good and it worked out really well for him, obviously. And nowadays he's like one of the best players in the world. So, it was a learning experience for me at least, and I think it was a positive change that we made to the team. Even though like maybe my form dropped or something like that, maybe I wasn't playing as good as like what I had before. But now that I'm looking back at it, I think it was definitely a positive change for the team because obviously we had some success with it, and it kind of opened up a lot of opportunities for us as a team. And yeah.
Yeah, this is obviously when the results started to go up and culminating in quite a famous incident where you won one of the smaller Starladder tournaments.
Yep.
Now, here's the thing I'm going to set up here. Even when I say it was the VP Legendary squad more towards the end, I will say, before anyone goes like, yes, who cares? And it was like less than a week after they were second at that fucking Epicenter tournament where everyone was raving like, oh my God, they're back in the final. Wow, they almost won. Like, people were still giving them credit. Like, they were still a top team. They had it in them still. This must have been, if you think about the period of your career previously, to win this tournament, to actually beat a team like that must be a pretty out there experience. Like, and this obviously became something that eventually could become not an everyday occurrence, but it was possible at this point, right?
Yeah, it was actually great. Like, now that I look back at it, I don't think the teams at that event were like super incredible or anything like that. The VP team, I think, was good just because, like you said, the result that they had before that, and obviously it's VP. They can always, back then at least, they could always show up like and just do like super good versus any team. You know what I mean? So, it was definitely a really good result. The final was a really good result for us, beating VP like that, because I think we did beat them pretty convincingly from memory. At least it felt like it. And yeah, it was definitely a good experience for all of us, because obviously we'd never won an event before that, and it's something that we all wanted for quite a while. And I think maybe if the event was like, I don't know, a little bit more notable, it would have been better. Maybe if it was like an IEM or something like that, it would have been a lot better experience for everyone. But even if it was just like a small Starladder like that, it was still like something that like I think everyone on that team will remember. And yeah, beating VP like that was really good. But before that event, I don't think we really thought that we could win that event. I don't know if how much confidence we had as a team. I think it was kind of just like in the middle kind of thing. Like we weren't you know, crazy good or anything like that. I think we just had like a really good event run, and yeah, that's basically it. But I do remember around that time, I think it was a similar, maybe a tournaments after or before, we had like a series of like, we placed second at like 2 events or something like that. It might have been like one of the NA lands or something like that with Keith, and we played versus Cloud9 and stuff like that. So that was definitely a good period for us, because I think it's the same period where we won the event and then we placed like second or something like that. Like, you know, it was pretty solid results. And yeah, I think after that Keith left to join Liquid, I think. But yeah, that was definitely a good period, at least for the team. That was something that back then at least I thought was pretty big by us.
As you say, after this, he went and joined Team Liquid. Like, obviously, entirely understandable why he'll take that side of the deal.
Yeah, for sure.
But what I wanted to ask was this: I actually think it's perfect in terms of Renegades, though, because since he had like such a good stats impact, every pleb just thought like, oh, well, they're obviously going to be terrible now. Like, they've lost the best player, etc. But because the player you got in was jkaem, who at this point in his career, by the way, was like not particularly thought of as like a top player. In fact, a lot of people thought maybe he'll retire or something. You know, you seem like he kind of washed out of the top end of the scene. Obviously, previously being on FaZe Clan, it feels like this was almost like a perfect move in the light of the fact you didn't have a choice to keep Nav, because it seemed to me, at least from the outside, your team seemed to fuck with jkaem pretty heavy. Like the vibe was pretty good. Even in the game, it even seemed like his playing style kind of fit the squad pretty quickly. So what would you say about playing with jkaem?
Yeah, actually, jkaem, when we picked him up, we were scrambling to find players. We didn't know who to get, and we're like, oh, well, maybe we could try this guy. You know, like he used to be pretty good. Obviously, he had like a really good major before. I don't know how close of a time frame it was to when we picked up, but obviously played really good at DreamHack Cluj, I think it was.
Okay.
And he had a super good major run, and then he had no team. And I think when we were picking him up, we watched one of his streams, and he had like a little like webcam down the bottom. It was like $100 for a webcam or something like that. The donation got or something like that. And it's like one of the running jokes that we have even to this day. And I think when we picked him up, we weren't really sure what to expect, but he obviously wanted to play, and he took the chance to play with us. And back then we lived in Detroit, so it was actually pretty funny. You know, like a guy like from Norway moves to Detroit to play with an Australian team. It was pretty weird if you like looked out from like outside of the team.
Sure.
But straight away, like as soon as he got there, like he fit in with everyone. Like I remember he stayed up that night and he talked to Gomez, our manager. Like he was like talking with him quite a lot and stuff like that. Like I'm pretty sure he just like fit into the team super well, because the way that he plays, he's kind of similar to me. He doesn't like to butt heads with anyone on the team, and like cause like any conflict or anything like that. He's kind of just like he's a lot more like a soldier on the team. Like he kind of just does like whatever he's kind of told to do. But obviously he's such like an aggressive player and such like a good rifler that it just works out for him. You know what I mean? And I think that kind of suits his personality as well. You know, he's always willing to go in first and stuff. And yeah, I think it's just like really good having him on the team, because the vibe that he brings, like you said, he gets along with everyone on the team super well. And for some reason, like just our personalities, they clicked, like everyone on the team. And yeah, it was just great. I think we come from similar cultures. Now that I think about it, like Norway and Australia, you know, like we're kind of like pretty relaxed people, I'd say. And I think that's one of the big reasons why he got along well in the team and worked well with us.
Right, obviously, during this time period where the results got better, and even if the team didn't always place high in the tournament, you could actually just see it with the eye test in the games. Like, the map pool was way better. You had maps where you were taking the top teams close. They weren't just blowout games. One of the tournaments that has to be talked about, I'm sure it's a memorable one, is IEM Sydney in 2018. Because even though the tournament had existed previously, and I know the fans were obviously super gagging for the idea that, like, an Australian Oceanic team would do really well, it didn't really happen for obvious reasons, because back then, you know, the killers in the world, the SKs the world weren't going to lose. So this tournament, to actually beat, first of all, FaZe Clan, which is already like a massive accomplishment, then to be in position where you could have even gone potentially deeper and you were in the actual stadium, etc., in the mouse sports game, which is epic. Like, what was this tournament like?
Yeah, it was amazing. It's actually pretty funny because the event before that, the IEM Sydney before that, 2017, we bombed out super hard, and I think we lost to the Chiefs, the other Australian team. That was like super depressing. I think like that was like at least top 3 worst results that I've ever had. Like, it was so depressing. I just remember sitting in the hotel room after, like, this full darkness, this head in the pillow. I was like, what the fuck just fucking happened? And to have like the contrast between those two events, like next year where we win both games, we make playoffs, and we beat FaZe as well. It was like, I think it was like a best of 3. The last map was Inferno. It was like double OT or something like that. And I think I clutched 1v2 to win that. I think to make it out and to make playoffs. And after that, like that one round, like I felt my heart beating in my chest. Like, it was so hard. And it was like a super amazing feeling to know that, like, from the year before where we bombed out and we played super bad and we disappointed everyone and most of all, like, ourselves. From that event in 2018 when we qualified versus FaZe, who were obviously a really good team at the time. I'm pretty sure they won the event, didn't they? Or maybe it was next year that they won.
No, this is the one they won.
Oh yeah, okay. And then we won that game. It was just incredible. Like, I think there's even, like, if you watch the video, like, I jump up and give Kassad a hug. I'm pretty sure. And it was like one of the only times I ever did that. So it's to win that FaZe game, it was like super amazing. And then to go on to the, I think we lost to Tyler after that, but it didn't really matter. Like, that was just to make semis or something like that. I think we just choked that game super hard. But to play mouse sports in the arena, I think we went to 3 maps. I don't think I played super well, but now that I remember, that event was so up and down because we beat FaZe, right, and we qualified for the playoffs, and that was like 100, level 100. Yes. Then we played mouse sports, and on train on the last round, it was like a 2v5 or something. Me and jkaem, and I pull off like 3 sick kills, and then it goes down to like a 1v2. I think Sunny was left alive. And I'm like in the zone. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do this. 15-14. I peek and I try to kill Sunny. He kills me, and then I think I can't remember if I miscommed to jkaem or not, or like jkaem didn't hear him tap the defuse or something like that. And then we lost the round and we lost OT. That was like 100-0. It was just insane. Like, now, it's still to this day, it's like one of the worst memories, like one of the best and one of the worst memories, like all in the space of like 30 seconds. So like playing in front of that crowd was like super incredible, and like if I won that round, I think it probably would have been the best moment of my career. Like, it would have been insane. But unfortunately, we lost, and then obviously we're out of the tournament, and it's stung a lot for like a couple days after. But then like it hits you, like, you played in front of Australia. It's the first time that any team has ever done that. It's first time. Like, second time that we had an event of that size in CS in Australia, and obviously, like, that's just a big achievement in itself. It doesn't really matter the way it ended, but it was just like a really good moment for us, and I think everyone was like super hyped to be on the stage. It's just an incredible feeling to have that.
From the other regions in Counter-Strike, because the big regions are so big, people actually typically don't really think of it as like European Counter-Strike, North America as much, right? Like, it's just typical teams. Like, if you like this team, you care if they do well. If you don't, who gives a fuck? If you're a Fnatic fan, like back in the day, you don't care about NIP. It's not about Swedish CS. Were you guys kind of like cognizant of the fact that, like, essentially, whether you chose it or not, because you are coming from Oceanic region and you've got this like great storyline where you guys climbed up the ladder and you're now over in NA or playing in Europe, etc., like, people do sort of treat it as though you're like the representative of the region, right? You're basically, if you do badly, they're probably going to trash you because it makes them look shit, whatever. Was this actually present in your minds when you were over there competing?
To an extent, but I don't think it was bad as what people make it out to be. Honestly, okay. I think Australian CS fans, and I think it's also just the culture in Australia in general, I think they're very forgiving. Like, you do badly, maybe if you do really badly, then obviously they're going to trash you. But like, if you give it a good effort, people think that you're doing well, you're trying, that you're grateful and stuff for the opportunity and that you're given and everything like that. then they're going to support you. And I don't think it's like other countries where like fans are like pretty brutal to their teams. I think like, you know, every now and then you get like the bad person and stuff who like talk shit about you, but I think overall it's a pretty positive experience. But that kind of makes it more disappointing when you do poorly at events, you know, because like obviously everyone is supporting you and everyone wants you to do well and stuff. So like when you do badly, you let down yourself, but then you also let down people back home. And I don't think it was like that big of a presence. Like whenever we did badly, it was more just disappointing ourselves, to be honest. It definitely does suck like that you represent, maybe like majors or maybe at IEM Sydney you feel it a lot more because obviously you're representing your country at those two places. But when you're playing like event after event after event after event, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
This video was kindly supported by Lagger15, Matt Pugnatio Racula, Travis Goff, Zach Smid, Adam Oakes, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Blake McGuinness, Bot Pounder 420, Hades, J Dobbs, Jensen Go, Joseph Ginsberg, Kovacevic, Tobias Bernasconi, Zumba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks, of course, goes out to Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to ask me a question in one of my video AMAs? Do you want teasers for who the upcoming guests are going to be? Or maybe you'd like to take part in one of those long donated discussions that I do? Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.